Welcome to Manna from Heaven with Sharon Gaines Lee and Kingdom Purpose Television. Today I have Karla, attorney. She don't want me to call her attorney, but I'm going to call her attorney Karla Cruel. And Karla lives in Hawaii now. She did something on Instagram that really caught my attention. So the last minute I asked Karla, could you come on and do a program with me because I thought it was so interesting. So she freely accepted my offer, and I am so excited, and you will be excited too about this, especially Black people. I think so. We're
Mhm.
gearing this more to Black people, but white people you can listen into because we love each other. It's not a problem. You can learn
Mhm.
about us from us. And so today's topic is going to be. This is one of Karla's. She calls it cruel thoughts. Her last name is Cruel, and she
Yeah.
calls it cruel thoughts. And so every once in a while on Instagram, and then she'll post it on Facebook. She'll put in something that's going through her head, or something she sees, or concept she sees being misused, or thought. Just Karla is just Karla. Karla is Karla. So she'll come in, and I love this. I mean, when she started talking about this particular topic that we're talking about today, I thought it was so appropriate and so necessary for us to hear because we can take away the myth of this. And so I'm going to start with, and I'm calling this topic dispelling the myth that blacks don't support blacks. Dispelling the myth that blacks don't support blacks. And black people listening because we need to hear this because we need to have a different mindset concerning this. And Carla's going to help us, aren't you, Carla?
Of course. Yes.
How are you tonight, Carla?
Pretty good. Pretty
Thank you
good.
for joining me. So we want to start. I just want you to come in and tell me a little bit what got you started with this topic, Carla, and then I'll ask you some more questions.
Sure. So, to be honest, so I create these cruel thought videos all the time, and really, it's me, thinking about stuff in my head, and it overwhelms me, and it sort of becomes like fire shut up in my bones, right?
Right, right.
So I and then I'll create a video because it's a way of me getting that release,
Right.
and I'm posing questions usually to get people to think differently. So, in
Mhm.
particularly, what happened was I watched another friend's video on Instagram, and she posed a question, which I thought was a great question, and I commented on the question. And she was just asking about like black folks collaborating with each other.
Was she
And
white
so
who asked that? Was it a white girl or a black girl?
she's black.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And someone commented on there that sort of, I can't remember what her larger question was, but they commented that black people are never going to be able to do anything because they can't work together, right? So that was sort of her comment. And she added some other things, and I responded, we need to be careful when we make these absolutist statements about
Mm-hmm.
things. And I gave her examples of why sort of the why the she was my friend was specifically talking about the Montgomery bus boycotts
Uh-huh. Okay.
and how they were effective and the power of the black dollar and the if we boycott it now, it will work, et cetera, et cetera. And so the person was saying, no, people would never do that because black people can't ever just follow through and work on stuff together, et cetera, et cetera. And so I commented, I said, well, here's the problem is because they've sensationalized the Montgomery bus boycotts, not realizing that it took a really long time for people to actually boycott. Right. I said it was a small group of people that said this was a good idea. It started with a small group, but they were consistent and they
Mm-hmm.
continued to do it over and over again. And over time, they said, well, what is it that we need to give these people so they will stop riding the bus? So they started getting the rides, and white people joined in, and they would say, hey, we're going to pick you up. So there were black people who didn't buy in right away because they said, listen, I got to take care of my family. I
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
survive. I need this money. And so they were still riding the bus. But when the civil rights leaders gave them a mechanism for them to be able to walk, for them to be
Mm-hmm.
able to get a ride, right? And then they said, okay, we'll stop doing the buses, right? So what I commented on there is I said, it only takes a few to start it. And then if you stay consistent, others will join. So instead of us looking at the Montgomery bus boycott as, oh, the people got together then, but we won't get together now, is that
Right.
we need leaders to step up to be the small group who can build into the critical mass. That's the
Mm-hmm.
comment I made. And then the person responded back, sounds good, but I said what I said, right? Okay. So when they said that, I started thinking, what is underlying this person's statement? And I was like, it's that belief, that myth that Black people, we are the only race of people that don't ever come together. Every other race does it, but we can't do it. And because people have believed that to be a truth. And so what I was seeing, this is a very long answer to say.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Right. What I realized was usually I hear people say it and I just let them say it. I don't, because I know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And so I would just, I choose my battles, right? My dad taught me you only argue when you're wrong. When you're right, you don't need to argue. Right.
Right.
Just let them be wrong. Right. So I said, you know what? I never thought about the negative of not stopping people from saying, of not addressing it. Letting the myth carry on brings these other things. So that's what motivated me to do the video. Was I said, you know, I know enough facts that I have to challenge this as a myth. Because it is actually causing a harm to us that we won't even try to work together because we believe that we can't work together.
Right.
And that everyone else does it, but we're the lesser group of people and we always do it the worst way.
And what you're saying, Karla, is so, I don't want to, when I say this next statement, I'm not presuming that what you're saying is not spiritual, because it is. I mean, but when I thought about this, I said, wow, if we're the only race, that's a presumption that you know, that the sin consciousness that one can have is only on the Black race, and the Black race, you know, are the only ones. But there's every other race is not. Their sin consciousness is in order except ours. That's a presumption that is wrong. Because when I thought about this, it was like Jesus died on the cross only for Black people,
right?
Or did he die on the cross for everybody, that we could think and we could come together and we could work together? So I think that whole thing is a divide and conquer, don't you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It perpetuates. So I think that underlying the maintaining of the infrastructure in the United States of America, to maintain the economic structure of the haves and the have-nots,
right?
For poor to remain poor and the rich to remain rich, and everybody to kind of sit in their proper places. They do it by maintaining a us versus them, right? So I tell people this all the time. I believe that Dr. King, they were fine with Dr. King being Dr. King and running around and yelling civil rights until he started mixing with other races and saying, our struggle is your struggle. My white brother who is struggling to feed his family, I read one of his essays. He said, I was sitting in jail and I was talking to my jailer and I asked him what his daily life was like. And he talks about waking up, coming to this job that he can't hate, people yelling and screaming at him, trying to put food on the table for his children, and then waking up and doing this all over again. And Dr. King is asking the jailer, what, you know, in your dream world, what would you want? And why can't you do that? Well, I don't have money, or I don't have a home, or I don't have this, and I don't have. And then Dr. King said, my brother, your struggle is my struggle. Right? What Black people are saying is that we as a race are living the same life that you're living. So when he started dealing with the Quakers and doing all of that, the labor movement, that's when he was assassinated. Fred Hampton, when was he assassinated? When he started to bring the Puerto Rican group, the white Nazis, the Black people, he brought them together, and they were like, nah, he got to go, because us versus them, the whites versus the blacks versus the Asians, the Blacks versus the Hispanics, the whites and the Hispanics, right? You know, even recently when I started thinking about how Hispanics are categorized as white first, and then they have to say whether they're Latino or not, right? And I said, so if I'm a dark-skinned Dominican, or if I'm a dark-skinned Puerto Rican, do I have to identify as Black? Right? Do I have to? But the fact that we have been,
Karla, is it on the books like that?
In some cases, yes. So I've been doing some legal some of the legal work that I've been doing in related to civil rights
Right.
stuff, they oftentimes, for example, you say, what person are you looking for? They'll say white, Hispanic, right? They'll say black person, but then when they'll say white, they'll say black, and then they'll say white Hispanic. And I was like, why are they called white Hispanic? So I started to look at demographics. And if you notice, when you fill out demographics, it'll say, are you white Latino or are you white, and nothing next to it. And what I started to realize that this, again, is still a mechanism of perpetuating this us versus them, this better hierarchy around race. And I am not like the traditional Black person who cares about issues of equity. Let me say that. Similar to you, Sharon, I've lived outside of the US.
I was going to say, no, Karla, you're not.
Right. No, like we've traveled outside of the US. So we know that when we go outside of the US as Black people, they'll be like, oh, you're an American. So they start off with American and then they go to your color. They go to whatever.
Absolutely.
But you're an American, right? Africans, you go to different countries in Africa and they be like, you can call yourself Black all you want. You're an American.
You're right. That's exactly right.
Black, right? And I need you to recognize that. But Americans, Black Americans, especially when we haven't traveled out, we see Black and we just say Black and we're like universalizing our experiences for everyone else.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And we shouldn't do that because that's not true. Okay. So the reason I bring this up is because this concept of Black being lesser and that we universally get it wrong, it breeds a distrust in us amongst one another that we never want to work with each other, right?
Yes.
And then by not working with each other, we never overturn the infrastructure. We don't change anything, right? Nothing can ever change. So it's a great strategy to divide and conquer, right? I care as much about poor white people as I care about poor Black people. I know people want me to care more about poor Black people, but I think poverty shouldn't exist.
Right, for anybody.
America, for anyone. No one should be poor. No one should be homeless, right? But when they talk about homelessness, they'll talk about homelessness and then they categorize people. Vets, Blacks, they put us in categories instead of saying, why aren't we taking care of all of those people? Right. Because then the individual person says, well, I want to take care of the person who's like myself. Right.
Yeah.
And so then they don't want to fight the infrastructure.
Right.
You never challenge the infrastructure. You just continue to. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going on one.
No, that is excellent, Karla. That is good. It ties right in. Go ahead, finish up.
So my thought process in all of this is that we can do collaborative economics. I think today an economic boycott would make a difference, right?
Okay.
I truly believe if we said to Black folks, just African Americans in the United States of America, we said, you know what, for one day, I don't want you to spend $1. Don't go to the store.
All Americans, not just Black Americans.
No, I'm starting with them. If you just said to ask Black Americans to not spend $1, it would cripple the economy. However, when you approach another Black person and you say to them, this would be a great idea. Why don't we make, Juneteenth the day that Black people will not spend any money, right?
Right.
They'll be like, oh, you ain't gonna get no other Black person to do that because Black people can never come together. That's the first thing out their mouth. They've been programmed to not even attempt it because they believe that their brother and sister cannot be trusted. Right. And I'm like, but you don't actually need everyone. You need a critical mass of people. If you ask for everyone, maybe you get 30%, maybe you get 40%. But most Americans don't know that Donald Trump, our president, he was elected to office. Do you know what percentage of Americans actually voted for him to become president?
How many, Karla?
It's less than 30%. He was the president of the United States, and it's less than 30%. See, this is the thing. you got to take the US population and then you shrink it down to who are eligible voters, right?
Right.
And then, and that was a smaller group of people. So the numbers are kind of around like maybe about 65% of Americans are eligible voters.
Okay.
Okay. So 35% of Americans weren't even allowed to cast a vote. Okay. At that time. So now let's say we're at 65. He did not get the majority of the 65. He won the Electoral College. Right. So
that's another story for another time. We'll talk about
that. Is, but so we're in the 65. Those are eligible voters. But typically of the 65 eligible voters, only 60% of 65 come. So now you shrunk it down a little bit. So that's what 60% of 65 of the 65% of the whole total population. And then he got 30% of the 60. So that's less than 30% of Americans who even voted for him. And even in that, less than 30% were fans of him. They just didn't want to vote for Hillary. Right. So the news will make you think half of America hates people. Half of American are Trump, but that is not the truth.
Not even now. They're still perpetuating that now.
They are. And it's not the reality. It's a very small percentage, and they ignore all of the independent voters. They ignore all of the people who just don't vote because they no longer believe in the system. All of the people who are unregistered to vote. All of the prison. All the people in prison can't vote. Right. So think about all of these people who did not choose this president, but they will make you think that most Americans. Why? Because it maintains the infrastructure of us versus them. Right. I people have the issues with Donald Trump. I don't even think he's the worst human being or the worst person who's ever been in the White House.
Who do you think is
the worst person to ever be in the White House? This is
not one of my questions, but you brought that up, so I want to know.
I'm sorry. But during our living lifetime, I think it's Dick Cheney. I think Dick Cheney is one of the most evil people who have ever graced the White House.
And why do you say that? Because I still want to know, because you just
because if you start to look, there are a lot of policies that we are suffering the consequence of. Him when he was the vice president, as well as when he was an advisor to George Bush Sr. When he was floating around in those circles, he was doing a lot of backroom deals that created the policies that maintain the infrastructures of poverty and destitution and violence and crime and all of those things. A lot of those come out of policies that Dick Cheney was working on in the background to maintain the money of those who are already rich. So as one specific example, what was explained to me was when he was vice president, he had a meeting of the major corporations like gas, oil, gas.
Like Hal Burton, I remember that from upstate Pennsylvania. He had a lot to do with that.
And he said, hey, what policies do you need to be in place so y'all can drill more oil here in the US? And they said, well, you need to keep the EPA off our back. So they basically rewrote a lot of the laws without most Americans even knowing what they did, that allowed for a lot more pollution to be, so the EPA wouldn't even be able to police certain people because it wasn't wrong anymore, right? So you said, it's funny you say Pennsylvania. So the fracking that happened in Pennsylvania, it got worse and worse and worse. And a lot of those come from policies that Dick Cheney was maneuvering in the background.
Right.
So you got people sick with cancer, diseases, health issues, so that somebody else could be rich.
Right. That is so evil. That is, oh gosh, that's Karla. That's a different topic. But just while I'm right here, one more question. His daughter seems like she's the opposite of him. Do you think?
That's what I've seen, and I pray that that's true, because Dick Cheney was real good at hiding his evil. But maybe his daughter was like, oh, my dad is evil. I got to do something good to balance out his evil.
Right.
Okay, so here, what I said in my Instagram video, and it'll be shorter here because I've said it once, is that this is a myth that every other race of people except for Black people don't work together. And so is it true that African Americans have difficulty coming together and working together? Yes, that is true.
Mhm.
Is it also true that other races of people have
Oh, you
difficulty
say
coming
yes,
together?
that's true? You said that's true?
Yes,
Okay,
it is. There
talk to
is
me.
a difficulty.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I didn't say that we never do it, but I do think that we don't come together easily.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
and part of that is a lot of historical issues, right? A lot of distrust.
Mm-hmm.
We know from the history of civil rights movement that there's often a Judas in the group, right? And somebody who ends up selling out. And because we as a people are hyper aware of that history,
Right.
right? What happened to Malcolm X? What happened to Dr. King? Like we know that there was someone on the inside, Judas and the Black Messiah, Fred Hampton, right? He had a Judas in his group.
Mm-hmm.
So we're so hyper aware of that
Mm-hmm.
that we often won't even collaborate because we want to stick with the ones that we can trust,
Mm-hmm.
because we know we bring somebody outside. And there, I actually heard someone say this recently. There's always a black person who will sell out to a white person. They have.
Oh, that's in every race, though.
It is. And that's the thing. That's the key thing. It happens with every racial group. We become convinced that it only happens with us. And that's what I was trying to get at, is
Mm-hmm.
that every group has it. And what I said in the video is a couple of things that become the problem is that the news media does it as well. They overgeneralize, right? So they say, we say Asians, right? But Asian is very broad. Russians are Asians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Cambodian, Laotian,
Mm-hmm.
Uzbekistan, right? Sri Lanka, Malaysia, all of those different people. They are not all the same, and they don't all get along. So
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have friends outside of your own racial group,
Mm-hmm.
right, you get your information either from friends who are in that group, from
Mm-hmm.
TV, and thus you end up carrying a lot of stereotypes,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you speak things that are untrue. Black
Right.
people think, you'll hear black people say Asians stick together, Hispanics stick
Mm-hmm.
together, but black people never stick together. And it's like, all Asians don't stick together, right? Like a Vietnamese who drops in a town that is predominantly Korean, the Koreans are going to be like, "Come on, my Asian brother, I'm going to help you out." Like they don't do that either, right? And the example I gave was of my girlfriend. She lives in California. She's Vietnamese, and she lives in a community that has a lot of Vietnamese people. So much so that now they're like third generation. So
Mm-hmm.
they've actually gotten to the point where there's enough Vietnamese people that the kids don't even speak Vietnamese anymore. They can't communicate with their grandparents
Wow.
because they're so Americanized,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When other Vietnamese comes to her area, they don't help them out. Like, oh, you my brother. They do. Oh, well, we had to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
You do it too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to struggle too. And so
Mm-hmm.
the example I gave is like in Philadelphia is predominantly African American,
Mm-hmm.
right? Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, Chicago, where you have high populations of African Americans,
Right.
we will see an Asian immigrant come in and start to be taken care of and doing well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I was saying is that sometimes that's a product of them being a minority inside of a minority inside of a
Mm-hmm.
minority. So when the group starts to get smaller, people are much more likely to support and help you out,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Right.
So there's a section in West Philadelphia where there's a number of people from different Northern African countries, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they live near each other and they support each other, and they've actually created some like associations for that
Mm-hmm.
because they're a minority inside of minority inside
Right.
of a minority. So
Mm-hmm.
even though they're from 4 or 5 different countries, they're like, we speak common language. We
Yeah.
don't
So it
even
sort of
speak
pushes them
English.
together.
It
Right.
pulls them
Mm-hmm.
together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That commonality. And the more you have commonality, the more it's easier to have cohesiveness
Mm-hmm.
and move forward.
Right.
But one, we try to universalize that every Black person has the same Black person experience in
Mm-hmm.
America. And that's not true. There are some things that we have in common, but
Mm-hmm.
we often forget that there were freed Black people in America who never were slaves. So their
Mm-hmm.
children were generation after generation. We forget that there were some Black people who were freed, and then began to own slaves,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the mentality. And then there's generation after generation. So people like, I'm Black, so I must be a descendant of slave. And sometimes I want people to do this background because I'm like, it would be real funny if you found out that you Black, but they were slave masters. Right? And you like walking around, I'm just
From the Mazingo tribe.
right. And so my point is that we need to have more nuanced conversations, right? When I was in high school, I learned about the Trail of Tears, and we read some. My teacher had us reading some Native American journals from the time of the Trail of Tears, and one of the things I learned, and I didn't know, is that one of the reasons, there were many reasons why the old English attacked Native Americans, right? And they wanted their land, et cetera, et cetera. But in the slave states, Native Americans were stealing us and marrying us to free us from being slaves. So they were helping to free slaves because once you were in the native tribe, you were of a different nation. So they couldn't force them back to be slaves. So one of the ways they were helping out, and Andrew Jackson was like, I'm sick of these Native Americans, right? Kill them, get rid of them, because we need our slave population to make money, right? And we need Black people to be here for a reason, right? So all of these years we've been bogged down with these lies, right? We even like, despite the support that Native Americans had for us during a period of time, right? We hear stories about their struggle today, and it's like, but we still haven't got our reparations. And I was like, listen, we're all struggling, right? We don't have to. The thing, sorry. So I think that some of us
That's good. Don't be sorry. This is good.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome back to Kingdom Purpose TV with Sharon Gaines Lee as your host. Thanks for joining me. And I just wanted to say before I left, I wanted to put a plug in for my book, TT the Color Calico Cat. I hope you can see that. You see it behind my face? TT the Color Calico Cat by Sharon Gaines Lee and illustrated by Michelle Armbrust. And this book also comes, it doesn't come with, but you can also order a coloring and activity book on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. It's a great book that actually goes with TT the Color Calico. It is an excellent book for teaching kids about loving the skin that they're in and diversity. And TT, if you know anything about calico cats, which I learned early on before I did this book, but calico cats they actually have every color of the human race on them, those cats. And so I use that book to teach kids to love the skin that they're in, because you can't change everybody's opinion on the planet Earth, but you can change who you are on the inside. And so it bully-proofs your child. Helps to bully-proof them that they're loving the skin that they're in. And as you're reading it to them, you're going to get bully-proof too. So come join us. Go to Amazon.com or Barnes and Noble and order TT, the Color Calico Cat by Sharon Gaines Lee and illustrated by Michelle Armbrust.